Welcome. It's a real pleasure to be here today, and I think you're going to really enjoy the discussion. I'm Ronald Hanley. During the day, I'm Chairman and CEO of State Street, and I'm the Chair of the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce, which is a real privilege. As we assembled today for a discussion with really two exceptional leaders of our transportation system, Transportation Secretary Fiandaca and MBTA General Manager Eng. I think we have to just acknowledge they've inherited a system with significant financial, workforce, safety, and reliability issues. And if you think about Boston and the greater Boston area has been a place where there's been real innovation in transportation. For those of you that know the geography of early Boston, it was a peninsula. And back in the 16 and 1700s, if a farmer in Chelsea wanted to get to Boston, he or she would have to walk from Malden, Cambridge, Brighton, and Roxbury to get to the city. The journey took 2 days. Some would say it's not gotten any better. But since then, innovation has truly moved our city forward, and this has been a hub of innovation. In the 1800s, Boston had one of the first in the United States so-called horse car on rails. So a person would get from Central Square to Bowdoin Square in Boston in under an hour, which was considered monumental. It cost 5 cents then. Boston developed one of the first subway systems in the country. There's always a debate on whether that was New York or Boston. Let's just call it Boston. And really enabled hundreds of people to transit in and around and through the city. By the mid-1900s, the MBTA was established a regional transportation system, providing reliable public transportation at scale to thousands of greater Boston residents every day. Yet in the city of first, I think it's fair to say that our transit system is now in crisis. It's plagued with financial, safety, and reliability concerns. And in turn, that's caused our roadways to become the fourth most congested on the planet. Not in the United States, on the planet. That's not an accolade that I think we should aspire to attain. We can and must do better. Effective transportation is a public good. And I think that's the way that the Chamber is starting this discussion with, that it's a public good for the benefit of all, not just for the riders. And why do I say that? Because if the system is broken, people will have to drive or work from home. This contributes to congestion on our roadways, disconnected and disengaged workforces. You can talk to employers about this, how much the transportation system is preventing the return to office. It's a very, very big problem. And a lack of vibrancy in the downtown. Fortunately, Boston has been able to avoid, to this point, what's going on in a lot of other cities in terms of the deterioration of safety. The thing that causes safety to deteriorate is the absence of people. When there's nobody around, things don't get better, they get worse. Conversely, we believe that a strong transportation system is a foundation, a first step that enables us to address all the issues that we know we need to address in the Commonwealth. Affordable housing, climate, economic equity, and access to better education and healthcare. And for the first time, certainly in a long time from my experience, the business community is virtually universally aligned on this topic. There's no disagreement that one, it's important, but two, that it needs to come first. Right? That we need to get at this before we actually can reasonably address issues like housing. And housing is maybe the best example. I think we all know that there's a shortage and deficiency in affordable housing. It's a very large number. And the idea that that's all going to occur with more building in Boston proper just it's not doable. There's not enough land to do it. There's zoning restrictions, et cetera. It's not going to happen there. Affordable housing is a regional problem, but building more homes without actually addressing the transportation issue is errant. We're going to go from fourth to third, if not first, on the congestion topic. So this is the work and the major bit of work for the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce. The good news is we've got a terrific head of the chamber, somebody that actually knows his way around the transit system. Jim reminded me that one of his first jobs, he actually did overnight rail building work. He also reminded me that he only worked 4 hours a night. Jim, I got to talk to you about importantly, we've got an administration that's recognized this as an issue and is not going to put it off. They're going to address it, and they're going to address it head on. So today we're going to hear from Secretary of Transportation Gina Fiandaca and General Manager MBTA Phil Eng. The two of them have extensive knowledge and experience in fixing systems, and that's exactly what we need. But before we get started, what I'd like to do is introduce our event sponsor, Chamber Member Pierce Haley of Sirlin Haley, who's going to introduce the speakers in our moderator.
Thank you, Rob. Good morning. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Pierce Haley. With my partner Andrea Sirlin and our team at Sirlin Haley, we are pleased to partner with the Chamber in this event. We are a law firm here based in Boston with national lobbying clients. Representing business before government, we partner with our clients, understanding their issues and getting their needs fulfilled. We have offices in Augusta, Maine, Boston, DC, and Sacramento, California. We bring a national perspective to the issues confronting government. Again, Sirlin Haley is excited to partner with the Chamber in presenting this important event about the future of transportation in the Commonwealth. I'm honored to introduce today's featured speakers, Secretary of Transportation Gina Fiandaca and General Manager MBTA Philip Eng. As the Commonwealth's leaders on transportation, both Secretary Fiandaca and General Manager Eng are committed to addressing the complex challenges our region faces. Both leaders bring substantial expertise to their roles from years of transportation experience. Secretary Fiandaca previously served as the Assistant City Manager for Austin, Texas, and as the City of Boston's Transportation Commissioner when I first met her. Philip Manager Eng previously led the Metropolitan Transportation Authority's Long Island Railroad and New York City Transit. Every day they are working to create a more effective and resilient transportation system that will move our Commonwealth forward. This conversation will be moderated by our President of the Chamber, Jim Ruby. Jim, a former T official, started as a track laborer, as John just said, and concluded with his T career in the C-suite. As President of the Chamber, he continues to provide leadership and strategy to transportation challenges today. We look forward to hearing about the projects and the future-minded goals of our transportation system. Again, please join me in welcoming to the stage Secretary Fiandaca, General Manager Philip Eng, and Jim Ruby.
Okay, good morning everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Ron, I only worked 4 hours because the train stopped at 1 and started at 5, so unless you wanted me to be on the tracks while I was happening. And I'm sure that Phil will talk about the challenge that creates for work. Secretary Fiandaca and General Manager Eng, thank you for joining us today and for giving this time, but also for jumping into these jobs. They are described as 2 of the most thankless jobs in Massachusetts government, and we're very pleased that both of you have been willing to step up and help us solve this crisis. Now, I want to get into some of the big, broad issues about the T and transportation that Ron spoke about, but let's start with the most topical thing in transportation these days, the closure of the summer tunnel, which we're experiencing right now. Secretary Fiandaca, let me start with you. So, 2 quick questions. Why was this necessary, and how's it going so far?
Okay, well, the Sumner Tunnel is a structure that's almost 100 years old, and it is the 2nd oldest tunnel in the country that carries vehicular traffic. It was due for some rehabilitation work, and we did as much work as we could over the last year on the weekend closures, but a structure that old that carries 40,000 vehicles a day is a vital link not only to the North Shore, but to our strongest economic engine, which is Massport. The tunnel connects East Boston, which is an island that also houses Massport. So it was overdue for this rehabilitation work. It's a $160 million project. One thing that you'll find is that we worked hard across the Secretariat on mitigation strategies and really communicating that to the public. How can you get around? We know that this is a vital link and it's incredibly impactful, not only to commuters from the North Shore, but to everyone really that has to traverse that area of the city. I see in the audience that we have Laura Piscopo from the East Boston Health Center, great partners with us when we think about how we support our community and how we support Massport, all the travelers, but free Blue Line, reduced fares on commuter rail, reduced parking, free ferries, new ferries, and all kinds of options through a 511 app. But what you find more than anything is really partnership with everyone here in this room, including you. And I know that you've been great partners with helping us, figure out what is the proper mitigation strategy and communicating it. I also say that, the work is on schedule, that we have a dashboard that is available, anyone can log on. We're just about 25% into the project. And we're tracking how people are getting around. Where are those pinch points, and how is the HOC, the Emergency Operations Center, and all of the agencies that are there making these adjustments in real time to travelers, to motorists, and getting that information out to them. Great partnership with Massport, with the state police, with Boston Police, with emergency response teams. And by all accounts, we'd say that we're not ready to declare victory yet, 2 weeks in tomorrow for the project, but I think that motorists are finding that we're being honest and transparent about what the impacts are and why this project was necessary now.
I would agree that the communications leading up to it and during have been tremendous, so congratulations on that. One push was to get people to ride the Blue Line, Phil. So how's that going? Are you seeing people making that choice, and what's ridership been like on the Blue Line?
Well, absolutely, trying to get people to take mass transportation was one of the key parts to, I think, the successful ability to allow MassDOT to do the work, the critical work on the tunnel. And I think I heard Ron earlier talk about the transportation system as a whole has to function together, and I think the communication and the collaboration between the agencies is vital to being able to have the Blue Line, among other things, be a viable alternative. There was a tremendous amount of work that needed to be done in order to be able to recommend and suggest to people to take the Blue Line. And obviously with the amount of work and the speed restrictions that were in place when this was all being discussed, it was vital that we prioritize a lot of the work along the Blue Line. And because of that hard work with the workforce that we were able to bring the headways back down to levels where even before speed restrictions, we were running 6 minutes or less during the rush hours. And that headway is vital to being able to say, come ride the T, because the last thing we wanted to do is to have where we could not accommodate the ridership. And on a different day, that would be something I would love to be able to work, have that challenge as we bring ridership back. But in this case, as people still figure out which modes of transportation to take, I think the key is we've given them so many different options to get out of their cars, whether it's commuter rail, whether it's the Blue Line, as the Secretary mentioned, the ferries, the water transportation, is not only something that we're looking at for the Sumner Tunnel, but we're looking at big picture, and that's why it was a great opportunity to be able to provide water transportation, new water transportation as part of this. But we're looking in terms of the long term, because ultimately is how do we take the T and make that the prime alternative to get people out of their cars. But really happy that the Blue Line is doing what it is. The ridership has fluctuated from day to day, but we've even seen on some days where we've had pre-pandemic numbers greater than pre-pandemic numbers on certain days.
Yeah, the reports to date have been great, and I think beyond, meeting the needs of the commuters, it's a big opportunity, challenge for the T to build back some of their confidence that I know that both of you were focused on, of the workforce, of the riding public, and so forth. So yeah, keep it going. To date, it seems like you guys are doing a great job. Back to sort of the general topic, you're both in the jobs for just a period of months. We both decided to take on a tremendously challenging task. So, you know, Secretary Fiandaca, your overall assessment of sort of what you stepped into and the challenges, Ron kind of listed some of them that you face as Secretary of Transportation, and then maybe Phil after that will ask you the same question.
Thank you. So, you know, as the governor and lieutenant governor have said many times, you know, we can't have a functioning economy without a functioning transit system. And that's really key. It's foundational. And I think as your board chair has said to us yesterday, that it's the linchpin, and we understand that. Workforce is one of our top priorities, attracting and retaining top talents to get this job done, building the team that can carry it out, attracting top talent like our general manager to come to Boston and take on these challenges, building out a safety team with Patrick Lavin, another top talent that we've attracted to address all of the safety needs across the Secretariat. Partnership is a big theme of ours. Collaboration, and we know that we depend on the partnership of everyone here. And we are ready to work with you. And we know that as we move into the challenges of the future, we can't do it alone. And that's probably the biggest takeaway, working across the secretariats with our other secretaries of economic development, A&F, housing certainly, education, environment, all of it works together. And I think that the Healy Driscoll administration sees that partnership and collaboration will be the key to our success.
So I know one of the key reasons I came, aside from really enjoying public service and the satisfaction of delivering for the public that really relies on the systems, was, as the Secretary mentioned, you know, the leadership of Governor Healy and Lieutenant Governor Driscoll in working with Secretary Fiandaca. The passion that they have with regards to just how vital transportation is, and seeing the needs that we had, was something that really attracted me to be able to come here and be a part of not only rebuilding the system, but being part of how the greater vision of the Commonwealth can be. And that's, you know, some of the things we talk about: the housing, the economy, businesses, and how transportation is integrated and vital to the success of all these different components. And you see it throughout different places, not just here in Massachusetts. But when the transportation system is not what it can be, you know, those businesses do struggle. And when you do see the ability to come in and provide that robust transportation system, you see the reverse. People gravitate to those areas, businesses thrive, and maybe even to the point where, you know, how do you control and manage the new growth that's taking place? And that's where the team needs to be a part of these different discussions. The ability to come here and work with the workforce that has all the institutional knowledge is really a top priority of mine. The challenges that we have, and we have a lot, are things that I know that we can overcome, and that's where we're going to continue to build off of the existing knowledge that we have and take advantage of the industry that is our partners here too. Because that's how we're going to solve these problems. Right now they seem to be widespread. We will tackle the worst case scenarios, we will tackle safety, and we'll tackle reliability. And as we do those different steps, the building blocks of each success, we start to bring back, I believe, the trust from the public, the confidence from the businesses, that the transportation services that they need will be there, and they can help them, you know, plan their futures, knowing that the transportation system is on the right direction.
Great. I want to get into all of those challenges that you mentioned, but I'm a data guy. I love data. And Ron referred to a report, a study that said that Massachusetts, our greater Boston, has the 4th worst congestion on the planet, I think. We all sit in it, but we were thrown for a loop when that was the result of that study. So, Secretary Fiandaca, on the highways, what are you seeing? What are the trends that you're seeing in terms of congestion and driving? And maybe Phil afterwards, what are the trends on the different modes of transportation and on the T before maybe pandemic and during and after? What are we seeing happening? So highways and transit.
I think we're seeing what all of you are seeing, and that is that there is no more rush hour, AM and PM, rush hour commutes, that it's spread out throughout the day, and I think that the pandemic has certainly changed commuting patterns. I think what we've seen is a lot of demand on our roadways in different ways than we expected. Certainly, we need to address resilience. Past storms of this weekend have really tested that, so out west. But also what we've seen is that part of the change in commuter patterns, I think, is that we're all a little bit less tolerant of that long commute. We expect it to be more predictable. We expect it to be less arduous, I guess. And we expect our transportation systems to function well. That, something as simple as, circulation patterns and traffic signals to be well coordinated. We know we have the technology to do that, but, we certainly expect that, and there's just a higher demand, I think, from the consumer.
Phil, what are you seeing on the T? Commuter rail, rapid transit, light rail, buses?
Well, I just want to build off a little bit first of what the Secretary said as well. I think the travel patterns, what we're seeing here, are no different than what we've seen across many major cities. In New York, it's the same thing. The commute has changed, right? The morning rush hours of the really heavy 4 hours in, 4 hours out has changed with the pandemic. And obviously, in a lot of places, and same here, the vehicular traffic has come back to pre-pandemic levels, if not greater, because of that. But the flexibility that we've learned from the pandemic, I think, has given all of us in the transportation world the need to rethink how we are serving the public, because there is the ability to distribute the ridership, and they have more flexibility in their time. But what we're seeing on the T is exactly that. There are certain days where people take advantage of the ability to work remote, and typically those are lighter days of travel on Mondays and Fridays. Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays are typically the heavier days. But just like the highway system, we're seeing that the peak hours are spread out earlier, later. There are some folks, the blue collar folks, that have to be in at certain times, so there's always going to be a core. But how do we now support and make sure that the transportation system is not only robust for those throughout the days, because you never know which day will be your heaviest. But how do we ensure that then during the other hours, which traditionally has been lighter, that we have sufficient service, because those riders are the ones that we also want to attract and reinvent in some ways the ridership patterns, and not have it just for travel to and from work, but travel to and from all the great, exciting things that we live in the Commonwealth for, and I think that's part of the whole transportation system working together.
Are you starting to see trends in ridership on the different modes?
We have seen ridership come up since May. Early on, it was stable. So riders are coming back. On the Blue Line, it has been higher since the Sumner Tunnel. It's only 2 weeks in, although I didn't even realize it was already 2 weeks in. The time is going fast. But we have seen ridership increase there on the Blue Line. We've seen the buses not necessarily all increasing, and I think that's partially because they are riding in similar traffic, so people are opting for other things. The ferry ridership has been very strong, which is very encouraging to us, because that's what we wanted to see, if ferries would be an option. So what we're seeing is it's been light to moderate on certain days, and other days been heavier. We've been able to accommodate the ridership that has chosen to take mass transportation. We have capacity for more folks, which is good because we're only 2 weeks in, and as traffic continues to struggle, I think people will try mass transportation.
Bill, you mentioned transit-dependent workers and that portion of the workforce that does not enjoy the flexibility of a work from home option. And the numbers say that's about 2/3 of the workforce. And sometimes when we think of the data in a new order in terms of working, perhaps we don't think enough about those workers. As you're thinking about service planning, how do you think about the public safety worker, the hospitality industry worker, the hospital workers that have to be there, sometimes at crazy hours of the morning and at night? How do you think about them in terms of service planning? Because the data might tell you, well, there's not many people riding, but those people really need the service.
I think that goes back to how public transportation is an essential, vital component to a thriving city, thriving economy. I think everyone realized that during the pandemic, that workforce had to go in many cases. They had no choice, despite that we were telling people to stay home and stay in your houses because that's the safest thing to do. I mean, on Long Island, there was always this debate, why was the Long Island Railroad running the level of service that we were 24/7? And that's because of those essential workers that had to rely on it. And not many of them, that is their mode of travel. They do not have the luxury of other travel. So I think this gets to equity, this gets to the ability for people to have these different modes. And that's not just commuter rail, that's bus, that's ferry, that's the ride, and the subways. And the importance of that option, it really is, I say this sometimes, it's like air and water. You need it to live, and we can't lose sight of the fact that those folks rely on our system, and that's why we need to have a robust system that has the frequency that allows them to choose this option.
I think this conversation demonstrates the point that Ron made in his opening remarks about public transit as a public good, really, that benefits the drivers, because the better job you do in getting people on transit affects congestion. It's a service for those transit-dependent workers that have to sort of be there. And it really contributes to the vibrancy of the downtown to be able to get people into the downtown. So many reasons why public transportation is a public good. I want to move on to something you mentioned, Secretary Fiandaca, and ask you perhaps both to comment. Over the past couple of years, we've heard a lot about the workforce challenges of the T, starting with the numbers, really, of just being able to get enough people to deliver the service that you want to put out on the street. How do you think about, let's start with Phil and Secretary, you can jump in. How do you think about this worker shortage issue? Have you ever seen anything like it? And what's in the solutions bucket? How do you deal with needing hundreds, if not thousands, of people on a steady stream of new employees coming in?
Well, the hiring needs of the T obviously are front and center with a lot of conversation. But I will say this, the demand for hiring is not just our agency. The demand for hiring, even when I was in the private side, was very, very competitive. I think the need for the folks that come out of public agencies is very desirable, and with all the infrastructure work that's ongoing, we are competing with a sector that we always knew was there for public servants to eventually try out, but the demand has really increased there. With regards to the workforce, the ones that I rely on day in and day out, and this is something that I've always talked about when you're in public service, you can do 99% of the things well. It's those few percent that always seem to make headlines that make it really hard to be, I think we were joking outside about, conversations at the dinner table, right? You get that feedback from family members and friends, but then you also read about how, the comments that are being made when service is not what it should be. And what I'm working through is really telling folks, and the ones that enjoy public service do it because they really know deep down just how important the work they do is, and you don't need public recognition to know that you're providing a greater good for yourself, for your family, for your friends, for your neighbors. So what we're looking to do is to continually not only address those things that the workforce that has to come in and be present 24/7 in some cases, but to make sure that they know just how important the work they are doing is, that they are appreciated not only by the management entity, but the ultimate results that they're delivering. And how do we better show and demonstrate the successes? I think the Blue Line is a very strong success that the workforce can take pride in, because there were challenges throughout the whole system. We had challenges with ensuring worker safety, we had challenges with the workforce and the numbers of resources, yet we were able to accomplish what we needed on Blue Line to provide that level of service that the people deserve. Now, how do we take that and continue to do that across the rest of the system? Need to restore that pride. It's there. I think it's just been kind of one of those areas where they feel the challenge of always under the scrutiny, and that's where I come in, that's where the managers come in. You know, they have to know that we have their back and that we're actually looking at, which is why I get out and about, because I like to see how they go about their jobs. Do they have the right tools? Do they have the right direction? And make sure management is supporting them. And that is happening, and we're going to continue to build off of that.
Always under scrutiny. Welcome to Boston, Bill.
So as you think about the need for bus operators, train operators and the like, in building your service plans, does that affect your ability to deliver the service plan that you'd like to deliver, but you just don't have the bodies to build the schedule that you want to build?
Well, it's a combination, Jim, of all of those components, right? We have to have the workforce to run the service. We have to have the workforce to maintain the service. We have to have the workforce at this point in time to bring it back to the levels that we need to provide the robust, frequent, reliable service that people need. So right now, you know, a lot of these entry-level positions that we need to operate are also the feeder pool for the positions that, you know, we're promoting them into. So it's a combination of all of the above. We are constantly right now working to bring on the skilled workforce that we need for track, power, signals. Operators are obviously another area, but then we need to get the infrastructure to where it can be so we can provide that level of service that people deserve.
Secretary, I'd like to take it up to the professional ranks, management ranks, engineers, financial management, all of the other sort of dimensions of running an organization like the T and MassDOT. Talk about the workforce, the ability to attract, retain talented people in those categories.
Yeah, that's a great question, Jim. You know, the first thing is across the Secretariat, we have an incredibly talented and dedicated workforce. First thing we want to do is to make sure that they know that they're valued, that they're appreciated, and keep them from leaving. That we want to retain the talents that we have, and we want to create the career paths and the pipeline for new employees. That MassDOT, the MBTA, the entire Secretariat is the employer of choice. And we've already seen that across some of our divisions, that there's an excitement around transportation. The fact that all of you are gathered here today just tells us that there are some incredibly exciting opportunities, and public service represents something like no other profession, that you can have such an impact. And that's what we're seeing, that the Healy-Driscoll administration has created that enthusiasm to be in public service again, and they like what they see. You know, in terms of attracting and retaining engineering staff and professionals, the opportunity to be involved in projects like the Cape Bridges, like Alston I-90, like 495 interchange. So many of those things are just like large scales. But then there's the projects that impact our communities through all of our district offices. That staff, they're embedded, they're part of the community. And when you see that the shovel in the ground leads to a ribbon cutting and the impact that you make, you know, that's the reward right there. And I think that's what we're building across this administration.
Yeah, we hear a lot about the culture and morale in transportation. It sounds like you both are focused on that critical issue of trying to build that confidence in themselves and the workforce and in the organizations they work for. So, a lot of talk about safety. Phil, you know, you've got a new partner in FTA that's watching everything that you do. Talk about the oversight of FTA, what their expectations are, and give us an update on the work that they're requiring.
Well, the FTA has always been a partner in terms of working with different agencies, including ours, ensuring that the policies and procedures that we have in place are appropriate, ensuring that those procedures are being followed, and making sure, just as we are at the agency, prioritizing safety as our #1 priority. And as we go through the different levels of the FTA and the SMI, you know, we are one by one starting to improve our policies and practices. The safety training has been a big area of a lot of work, but right now success. We've put people through a new robust training program that focuses not only on the in-classroom training, but on the field training in terms of how safety and right-of-way access is going to be done moving forward. At first, that seemed like a tremendous task, but to the testament of the workforce at the T, we put that program together. We've gotten several thousand people through that training, and we're going to continue to do that moving forward. They are always, in terms of ensuring that we have the right direction. It's a good partnership, good communication. Obviously, you know, the key to their success is, you know, how do we implement not only short-term measures, but make this part of the culture. And that is the other part that we're working through with the QCO office in terms of making sure that we are not just putting Band-Aids on things, that we're actually setting us up for the long-term success. And that has been moving in the right direction between, as the Secretary mentioned, Pat Lavin joining the team. He's brought a wealth of experience with safety, but also in ensuring that our workforce knows that they just need to speak up and we will follow through now.
Is there an end date moment that you're outside of this, whatever consent decree or whatever they call it? I don't want to use the wrong language, but at some point do you satisfy and they go back to regular oversight?
Well, I would say, as far as their satisfaction, it's closing out the different components of the SMI and the different directives that we have. But it will never really stop. You know, the thing that I want to instill in the agency and remind folks is that it's always continuous improvement. Even when you think you've accomplished what you set out to do, you can't stop. You know, you talk about the higher, right? When we get to those numbers that we need, we can't just stop at those numbers. When we get to a point where we think we've improved our safety processes, you always have to continue to look at where you can make it even safer. And that's just the nature of the job. I think where you think that you've accomplished it, you just need to know that there's still more to be done to make it sustainable and long term. Because it's so much work to get to where it is, you could fall back so much quicker.
Secretary Fiandaca, you created a new position, MassDOT Safety Chief, and hired Pat Lavin into the job. Tell us why and what's Pat going to do?
So Pat Lavin joined us this past spring, newly created position by the Governor, Chief Safety Officer for MassDOT, overseeing all aspects of safety across the Secretariat. You know, part of his role is to create and instill a safety culture across the agencies that, as the GM has indicated, that safety is everyone's responsibility. But we need to make sure that our staff know that the public we serve know that nothing's more important to us, whether it's safety of our infrastructure or safety of our assets, safety of our workforce, that creating the training programs and providing the tools and the expertise for a safe environment, and making sure that staff know that as safety is their responsibility, it's ours too, right from top management, that we want to know about what they're seeing and experiencing in the field, and that we take pride in our work and pride in the service that we deliver. So Pat's been part of the senior team, took a tour of our Sumner Tunnel before we closed it down, And so he's already been part of the Mass Drive team in areas beyond the MBTA.
Okay, Phil, slow zones and state of good repair. You're a veteran of transportation. We've got slow zones anywhere. I guess multiple questions. Have you ever seen anything like this in your career? What's your plan for tackling all of these slow zones? And should we expect, shutdowns of lines for weeks, periods of time, or sections of lines in order to remedy the situation you found?
So I will say that I have seen similar situations in my past opportunities of career. I'll just quickly go back. Back in the '80s when I was working at the New York State Department of Transportation, I told some in a different group. I was in charge of the bridge inspection program, over 2,200 bridges in New York City, and similar, although not transit. The conditions of those bridges were from a lack of maintenance, a lack of investment, all in a state of disrepair. And the challenge of providing service, as well as making sure safety was a top priority and getting those things tackled, is similar to what I've seen at New York City Transit and what I've seen along Long Island Railroad. And so this is not something new, and I think it's a matter of making sure that we focus on not only addressing where we have slow speeds, but to make sure that we're tackling those locations where safety is part of the slow speeds. And the reasons that you have the speeds is to make sure you're protecting safety, but you can only rely on slow speeds for so long, right? So we are going to, and we have been tackling those locations where we see not only time impacts to our riders, but we want to make sure we restore the safety component to the levels it should be. Packett's Corner is a very good example of that, where that work that's ongoing right now will, due to the geometry, will not restore speeds up to what we would hope in other straight areas, but it will restore safety to the levels it should be. And that will allow us to run it at the line speed, which is not much more than where we are, but safety is paramount, right? The ability to tackle the worst conditions will give us the ability to then focus on how do we now do a more widespread tackling of the different areas where perhaps they're not as mostly felt, but as we tackle these low-hanging fruit, that'll give us the ability to start thinking bigger, because those are the things where once you have the system running more reliable, you can start talking about supporting the larger capital needs and the modernizations that now have to follow, because that's also part of what we're striving to do. Safety and reliability will never be second, but how do we ensure that we're building towards the future? Because everyone sitting in this room is looking for that robust transportation system, and that, from my perspective, is a key part of our responsibility. Make it safe, make it reliable, but also how do we invest in the future?
Yeah, I mean, anyone that's remodeled a kitchen knows you can't cook in it. Well, you're tearing out the cabinets and the appliances. So we jokingly refer to the 4-hour work window that you have at night. Can you really do all the work you need given that very short work window? Or, for the next few years, are you going to be saying, we got this shut down this section of different lines?
Well, we're gonna balance those different things, right? There is obviously work that we can accomplish in that 4-hour window, but there's other work where we need early access, and we extended the hours of the open night. The other option is weekends, and then obviously, as you alluded to, Jim, whether or not we're doing like Packett's Corner, shut it down, get in, get it done right, and get out. And I think that's where we balance the communication with the businesses that surround these areas of work, the communities that rely on these areas. The ability to get in and get it done maybe means a little more pain, but for a much shorter duration. And from a public taxpayer perspective, we could even be more efficient in getting the work done. When you're doing work in these little tranches of 4 hours, it is not the most efficient way, but it is also a way to continue to run service. So I think maintenance, inspection, routine work, those are best for those 4 hours. But when we need to start to do track replacement, tire replacement, we really now need to look at either extended hours, weekends, and And in some cases, when the limits are much greater, those weekend surges or the extended surges. The thing there is we need to have good coordination in advance so people know and can plan for that work, and that they also know when we will finish that work.
Okay, we'll look forward to those conversations and working with you on that. I mentioned the confidence issue in terms of service, reliability, safety, but another factor in public, government, business, community confidence is the project management of the team. Fare collection system, it's delayed for years. The red and orange line cars delayed for years. I could get on a list of projects that are either over budget or behind schedule that you walked into. Your assessment of the capacity to manage those big projects, and particularly in the case of the red and orange line cars, the challenges of holding those vendors accountable that you've also walked into. Secretary, and then maybe Phil, you can comment.
Sure, so, big issue, Jim, is really just focusing. Focusing on what the issues are. Part of it is, what need are we meeting and what problem are we solving with respect to the orange and red line cars. First thing that we did coming in was really assess the situation, what was happening out in Springfield. It's an important assembly plant there. We need these cars. We're depending on them. So, seeing what's happening firsthand, the GM has visited there as head high, and we have sort of, reset the expectations for this contract. Happy to report that we are receiving cars that are safe and meeting the needs of the MBTA on a consistent basis. But it's really just focusing on what problem are we solving and what are the needs that need to be met. I know the GM can talk about some of the other issues that we've been, sort of focusing on. But, certainly with respect to the orange and red line cars, we know that we need those vehicles. And it's putting together the right team in place to really identify how do we support the workers out in Springfield, and how do we make it clear that what our expectation is when we take delivery of the vehicles.
Yeah, I've spoken a little bit in the past about rolling stock and how agencies, not just the T, have procured rolling stock. And I do believe that as an industry, we need to look at that. Because the challenge is you go out for a procurement and you have a non-recurring cost of designing a new rolling stock. And you get the design, and then when you finally have the assembly lines going, the workforce initially has that learning curve. And I think that's what you saw here, but you also see that in many rolling stock procurements, right? These are highly complex pieces of equipment that are being built, and in many cases built for each system that they need to fit the geometry, to fit the needs of that system. What we had with the red and orange cars is where I will prioritize making sure that we get the quality and safety, over the schedule. The Secretary mentioned it when we were out there. We've seen between the work of the MBTA force and the CRRC force is they have worked very hard to improve production and they get the quality of the cars where they are exceeding the contractual requirements of that contract. The production is not where we need it to be, but it is improving, and they've committed to even improving on that now going forward. So we do need the rolling stock, but we're going to make sure that it's safe. CRC is committed to that, the T management is committed to that, and I'm pleased to see that the production continues to increase as we speak. So from that perspective, we're going to just keep forging ahead on this component. And I know you talk about projects in general, however you want to talk about that, I'd love that.
Yeah, I just think that, whether it's a function of the workforce issue we talked about earlier, the systems, the processes, what is it that, we look back over the last 10 years, you're an engineer, Phil, you've built things. The process of getting something built, big transportation infrastructure investment projects. What is it about the T that they've not been able to over the past decade sort of get these things done?
I don't know if it's just the T again. Early in my career, the agency was more about just spend the dollars on time and on budget. Wasn't really a catchphrase. It really was, if traffic is moving or if the trains are moving, just keep the project going. But once you start to focus on time and on budget, and we start partnering with the industry, the engineering industry, the contracting industry, you can learn to deliver and meet those goals and expectations. And I use the example of the Long Island Railroad's third track project. This was a 10-mile stretch along the main line corridor of the railroad. Over 250 trains a day would run through that stretch, 10 miles, 8 grade crossings, and for 50 years, that was a project that was pretty much fought against. It was dead. It was never going to happen. In 2016, in January, that project was announced as being a priority. 2 years later, the environmental process was complete. Broke ground in September of 2018. $2.6 billion design-build project. 4 years later, it's on time, under budget. And the key to that is the open, transparent communication between the design-build team, the agency, but also the ability for the force accountant workforce to support these projects. We made a priority to ensure that the outages that they needed, the support that they needed, 92% of the outages that they requested were granted. The 8% that were not granted was because of COVID or because the contractor requested a change. So that gives the ability for the contractor to bid schedules, to bid prices, and for at the end of the day to deliver. And that was done in parallel with a tremendous amount of work to support the MBTA's Grand Central Madison, which is East Side Access, record state of good repair that was ongoing. So you can deliver. It's just a matter of really resetting the thought process and making those priorities. And that is the partnership, though, that we need, not just internally. The agency has to take responsibility, but we need the partnership from the industry.
Well, Phil, we look forward to you bringing that experience and skills to the table as it relates to project delivery. I want to get one more question, and I can't not ask about money. The finances, it's in the public domain about the upcoming fiscal cliff of the T. Talk about operating budgets and capital finances and, your thoughts on where we are and the kinds of things we need to do, Secretary. Jump in.
Sure. So, we all know that there's a challenge around transportation funding, right? We're reliant on a gas tax and everything related to an automotive industry. Our message with the Sumner Tunnel is ditch the drive, right? And we have challenges around electrification of our fleets and connecting technology. So, I think that the big question out there that most DOTs and transit agencies are facing, how do we fund transportation and how are we thinking about it as that public good? And so, that's really our challenge. I know tomorrow, MassDOT is voting on our capital plan. The following week, the MBTA is voting on theirs. So combined, almost $30 billion in capital projects for the two agencies over the next 5 years. It's a big challenge. But that's really what our community expects of us, and they expect us to work together to identify what is the transportation funding, transportation funding, not just transit funding, model for the future.
Yeah, I think Secretary hit on most of those points, right? And you said it earlier, public transportation is vital. It's for the public good, and it's essential. So how do we put a program together that balances to make sure that we protect safety, state of good repair, but also builds for the future? And that's a key component, because I think as we demonstrate the ability to deliver, that demonstrates the ability to fund transportation even more, because that goes hand in hand with seeking more funds but spending it wisely, right? And it's not just, again, safe, reliable service for today, but making tough decisions on how to do those transformative modernization projects that are also important to supporting the economy, supporting the public quality of life. So it's always ensuring that we are not losing sight of those important day-to-day activities, from workforce to state of good repair to safety, but then ensuring that we are moving the needle in the right direction and finding a way to deliver on some of those projects. And when you talk about on time and a budget, I think time is money. When things don't get done, you just tend to spend more money and you don't have the results to show for it. So it's going to be, as we rebuild, but also change the culture within the organizations.
So I'd like to close by stating that, as Ron said, our business community needs you both to succeed, and just ask in 1 minute each, how can we help?
Everything you're doing right here, Jim. You're bringing together the community, getting us talking about these issues, and being the support and the network. The Healy Driscoll administration depends on partnership and collaboration. We have ambitious goals, and we know that we are already an eighth of the way through, right? And so we have no time to waste. And so I would say that what you're doing right now, create enthusiasm around transportation so that we can build that workforce and the pipeline of talent, but also help us have those conversations with our community around, are we building the transportation network and systems that provide the resilience and the linchpin for our economy, and to partner with us as we do it.
Jim, you could help by coming back to the team and doing some track work for us. Even if it's 4 hours, I'll take it. Now, I just to build off what the Secretary said, it is the partnership, the collaboration with the industry, the businesses, and the transparency that the administration has really focused on as well. You talked a little about how do we deliver and how do we manage the capital needs and the operating needs. Those are tough decisions and tough discussions. But as we come out and have those communications, the intent from my perspective is to have those dialogues on what we can do and what we are trying to do, and then to be able to know as we work together, we can solve those problems. And that's where I think it's important, not only in terms of what we're trying to do for today, but having the discussions on the needs of the future and how partnerships between private sector and public sector can help deliver on those needs.
Great. Well, Ron said in his opening remarks that the critical nature of this to members of the business community, in the moment that we're in which I think that we are willing and able to address these challenges, whether they're financial or not, and to give you all the tools you need to do the kinds of things you do to deliver the transportation system that we all need and want and deserve. So we're gonna keep at it. I want to thank our friends at Wayfair for opening up their space to allow us to have this event. A round of applause for Wayfair. Please join me in thanking both Secretary Fiandaca and General Manager Eng for not only their time today, but for taking on these jobs and for partnering with us to deliver that system that we want. So, big thank you to them. Finally, a thank you to all of you for showing up today, but also for answering the call when I will call you to help and contribute to this collective effort that this needs to be. So thank you all for being here and enjoy the rest of the day.